Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
Well, super. I've already started crying. Hey y'all, my name's Jennifer Huddleston Kelly, and I am an alcoholic.
Hey Jennifer.
I've been kept sober since December 5th of '92, and that's my miracle. And the Legacy Group in Plano is my home group, Plano, Texas, by the way, as if you couldn't tell. And it's an honor and a privilege to get to participate in your conference. It truly is. What a delight. You guys have really put on a great show. And I want to thank the committee. I have been terribly behaved. As a matter of fact, they don't even talk to me anymore. They just email and call my husband because I've been all over the place. I mean, I've been a nut job, so buckle up. Apparently, I'm having a little hormone surge, and not in the good way. But I'm so grateful that we get to suit up and show up in Alcoholics Anonymous no matter what. And I'm so grateful that it's okay to say, I haven't been doing very well, but I'm sober and I'm grateful and I have a way of life that truly works. And the committee has done an amazing job. You really have. I got a Bill Wilson bobblehead. Are you kidding me? This is so great. I call him my spiritual advisor, you know? And all I have to do is go, Bill, should I buy a new dress? And he goes, yeah. It's awesome. Within 20 minutes of being here, and I also want to thank you for letting me bring my husband, Big Daddy. And I call him Big Daddy because it makes people throw up in their mouths a little. And we got married almost 2 years ago, not quite. And so we're still sort of in the newlywed thing. And I said, well, you know, when I'm 50 minutes in, give me the signal. Let me know, because I babble. Just a little foreshadowing. And he said, okay, here's the signal. Which is true. I mean, he gets full and it's all over. I married the world's biggest toddler. I love getting to do these things, and it's a lot of fun to get to come here. And it's always funny when people come up and go, we really want to thank you for the sacrifices you made. Really? The sacrifices. I'm not getting to do laundry this weekend. You know, I'm staying in Southern California. And y'all are just like us. I mean, only more. The guys are cooler, the skirts are shorter, the legs are longer, the hair is better. It's a good thing I don't get my okay from the outside anymore. The book says some may be shocked at our worldliness and levity, but just underneath it there is a deadly earnestness. And hopefully there's going to be a lot of worldliness and levity in my story, because I would just have a dumb story. I mean, it's not tragic or anything. It's just dumb. But please, in all that laughter, I want you to know that I know that alcoholism is progressive and it is fatal. And I am well aware of that. A couple of weeks ago, a woman that I sponsored off and on for a long time, a lot of off, a lot of on. She had been in and out for 10 years before I found her, and somebody set us up. They tricked us. She was in a treatment joint, a state-funded treatment joint, and one of the ladies that she had known in sobriety, she'd run through all the sponsors at that group, and so she called me and said, Irene really wants to see you. You met her at a meeting one time and you really made an impression on her and she really wants to see you. And she went to Irene and said, you remember Jennifer, she was at our meeting and she heard you were in treatment and she really wants to see you. And so I went to see her and we just had this awkward deal and she said, well, you can visit me again next week. And I thought, okay. And so I went to this, barbed wire treatment joint, and by the third week that I showed up, because nothing was happening, I'm thinking she wanted to see me, and she's thinking I wanted to see her, and neither one of us was really excited about this prospect, and she told me that I said, so do you have a sponsor? And she said, no, and I said, well, do you want one? Because it doesn't seem like much is going well for you right now. I'm probably your best hope. And I don't remember saying that, but it sounds a little bit like me. And it's not that I'm not great. It's just if I'm going to drive to that place with the barbed wire, I kind of wanted a reason. And we set out, and I sponsored her. And little by slow, she got better. And she put together the longest amount of sobriety she had, which was just short of 3 years. What Irene would do is she would come in and she would learn how to behave better. And she was literally an alcoholic who went from Yale to jail. And she would behave better until she couldn't stand it. And she'd go out for one weekend, and she'd come back in and she'd start over. And she'd be good, and she'd put together 6, 8, 9 months, and then she couldn't stand it, and she'd drink. And so when she got, 2 years, it was a really big deal. And she was coming up on 3, and she drank again. And much to her surprise, she couldn't get back for a long time. As a matter of fact, I assumed she was dead. And then I got on Facebook, and I found her. She found me, and she was living in D.C., and she had a nun for a sponsor, which was really ironic if you knew Irene. But she just wasn't doing very well, and in and out and back and forth, and she was doing it all on Facebook. You could tell whether she was sober based on the Facebook, because they would be removing photos when she wasn't doing well, and she liked to share. But 2 weeks ago, they found her body. And I'm still a little angry with alcoholism, but I know that she is at peace. And I know that this is progressive, and I know that this is fatal. And I know that we can't play let's make a deal with alcoholism. And Irene was an example of that for a lot of people, because they watched her come in and be willing for a little bit, and then decide she could go back out for just a day or two to get some relief. And I'm so grateful that I don't have to live that way, that I don't have to push those limits, and that if I maintain that only requirement for membership and do a few simple things that you taught me to do, and stick with the winners and all that, answer the phone and all that stuff, I don't have to find out what that's like. I get to live the best life I've ever had. I'm going to tell you in a general way what I was like, what happened, and what I'm like now, and I'm not very good at it in a general way. I was born at a very early age on November 16th of 1966. I was born to a football coach and an English teacher, and they are the most boring people you have ever met in your life. Tom and Charlotte met, they dated, they got married, and they had sex in that order. They did everything that they did on purpose. I mean, they went to work, they went to church, they paid their taxes, they had kids on purpose, bought a house on purpose, and they have stayed married on purpose. They are really boring. I mean, they do the right thing even when nobody's looking. It's frightening. And they had a bouncing baby girl on purpose. And I was happy and healthy and well-adjusted for almost 3 whole years. We have pictures. And then they brought home another bouncing baby girl, and she ruined everything. I blamed her for the next 30 years for every decision I made. I know this is Alcoholics Anonymous, but my first drug of choice was attention. And I have not fully recovered. And she interfered with my attention. And she absolutely destroyed any opportunity that I would have to blame my alcoholism on my family or my upbringing or my town. Because we went to the same schools, we were potty trained in the same way, and she went to high school and graduated, and then because she's a flippin' show-off, she went to college and graduated in 4 years. I'm 44 and I'm a sophomore. This is the only thing in my life I've ever paced myself at. After she got out of college, she went to work for Jesus in Bulgaria. My sister was a missionary. Yeah, she's precious. I was a cocktail waitress in a pool hall. We were both doing God's work in our own way. And while she was in Bulgaria, she met a Bulgarian man. They met, they dated, they got married, and they had sex in that order. Big Daddy and I got married in October of 2009. I was not a virgin. You know, and right up until my sister had my second niece, she's got 3 kids, because those Jesus people are breeders. She worked for Habitat for Humanity. And she didn't do that because she had a sponsor that said, you'll die if you don't do service work. She did that because that's just a swell way to live. I don't get her at all. I'm just not like those people, and nobody can tell me why. I mean, just right out of the chute, I was a different kid, and nobody knows why. I went to church, my parents were teachers, we had dinner on the table, we had breakfast on the table, like Mom with the frying pan, breakfast on the table, bedtime stories and summer vacations. I mean, they did everything as right as you could possibly do it, and I was just born with a twitch. I'm like a human chihuahua in a big body, you know? I'm just what? And I'm busy. I hear they have medications for this now, but I was always like this, and nobody knows why. Except maybe the big book Alcoholics Anonymous, selfishness and self-centeredness. That we believe is the root of our problem. And I live in this little bubble called my head, and it's a delightful place at times, and sometimes it's a spook house. And I'm just like that. I always was. I learned to be funny so it would look like I meant to act this way. But this is my normal state. It's just what? So anyway, I'm not going to bore you with all the stuff, but I like school because, as I said, I like attention, and you can be the worst or the best. There's plenty of attention to get there. And everything went really well until puberty, and which came to me in 3rd grade. And I discovered the boys, and as you heard, they discovered me in 2007. So my drinking begins with a boy, doesn't it always? I had met this guy. I love guys. I've always wanted at least 2 or 3. And there were some rumors that went around, but they were just rumors. I love guys. And but I scare the fish. I mean, I have not been a closer up to this point. And so this guy moves to town. He doesn't know anything about me, and he walks into the First Methodist Church, and I want what he has, and I'm willing to go to almost any lengths to get it. I see him from across the room, and he is everything that I know I will never be. He is tanned, he is toned, he is coiffed, he has a waist. I always wanted a waist. Ever since I gave up the Jenny Crank diet, that's been off the menu, but I'm getting ahead of myself. So, he was preppy when preppy was the thing to be, and I was goth before goth even existed. I was singing in the church choir on Sunday morning and going to Rocky Horror Picture Show at midnight on Saturday nights, and I wanted what he had, and he found me fascinating too, and we began to date, and long before I ever had a drink, I had Alkalogic. And I started dating him, and he was just amazing. He was amazing. And we hated the same people. We were disillusioned by the same things. He taught me how to shoplift. I mean, we had a future. And what I began to think was, I wanted to be a minister at that time. When I grew up, I wanted to be a minister, and I thought, if I'm going to spend the rest of my life talking about sin, I should probably try some. And I decided that he would be my introduction to sin. As a matter of fact, I decided that he was going to deflower me. Now, I did not discuss this with him because I have found if you include men in on their plans, they're going to screw things up. So I just came up with my own plan. I'd seen a couple of Molly Ringwald movies. I knew the basic ins and outs of this, and I just prepared to pounce. We went out one night. And it was a pretty special evening. We had just gotten a pretty good haul from the mall. The moon was full. Little Lionel Richie was playing on the radio, and we were headed out to go parking, and I was preparing to be deflowered, and that's the moment in which he decided to share a little secret with me. He's gay. Yeah, that's the first in a long line of those. And that affected my self-esteem. I am so self-centered. I thought he was gay at me, This is the 80s. It's not like he's thrilled about this himself. And I spent the next hour and a half trying to convince him he was not. Actually, I spent the next 2 years trying to convince him he was not. He still is, I checked. And really committed to that whole guy thing. And I got mad at him, and I got mad at God, and I drank. My first drink was very much an act of defiance against God. I was very aware of that. That was not something that my family was okay with. That was something I knew I was not supposed to do. But if being good didn't get me what I wanted, then let's try out being bad. My first drink, I was a closet drinker. I was sitting in the floor of a closet with Susie Haddockcheck. We had a bottle of Boone's Farm Tickle Pink and a bottle of Real Sangria. Your middle school wines, yeah. And we're over at Yolanda Garza's house, and I'd been driving around with these 2 bottles of wine in my car. I'd been fascinated by drinking, and some friends gave me this wine so I would quit asking questions, because I'd been doing research. I wanted to know. And we sat on the floor of that closet, and we drank. This is social drinking to me. There's some shoes, 2 bottles of wine, and a resentment against gay men in general. And it's a party. And Susie was a member of the drill team. Sorry. She's blonde, and she's still my friend today, and she can still do the splits. And I went to a high school, graduated in class of 1,500, 1,499 of them were either cheerleaders or on the drill team. And this is what I got to work with. Inside of me beats the heart of Barbie, but my body's made by Tonka. And I will outlast all of those broads with my low center of gravity and all, but it was another in a long line of resentments, because God had been playing these practical jokes on me. And I was just furious, because I had bought the same makeup they did, and I had the same curling irons, and at the end of the day, they looked like Bratz dolls, and I looked like a unmade bed. And I wanted to be better at drinking than Susie. Susie had drank before, and I hadn't, and I wanted to be better at this. And we began to drink, and I discovered drinking is my sport. I am good at this. It went down, it bounced up, it burned my nose hairs, and I pushed it down. It tasted like nail polish remover, but it went down, it bounced up, it burned my nose hairs, and I pushed it down. And by about the 4th time it didn't bounce, Susie drank half a bottle of wine, I drank a bottle and a half, because I'm a dainty flower. And I discovered a couple of things about drinking. I knew nothing. My parents did not help me out with this at all. I had to learn everything I learned all by myself. And one of the things that I learned is that if you drink a bottle and a half of wine in a 2-story house while you are drinking, that house is going to turn into a ship. And we're not talking a cruise ship. We're talking a pirate ship on stormy seas, because I stand up, I'm standing flat-footed, and I lose my balance. And I smash my face into the back of the closet door, and that is when the magic of alcohol began to work for me. You see, I'm intense, and I am sensitive, and I am intensely sensitive. I feel changes in barometric pressure, and it's about me. And the moment my face hit the back of that closet door, boing, not only do I not have to feel my emotions, I don't have to feel my face. And I want a lifetime membership to this. This is what has been missing for me. And that night I had the best night ever. I mean, we laughed and we talked and we wet our pants and we puked. It's the best my drinking's ever gonna get. You know, this is the one I'm gonna be trying to get back to, just peeing myself with a friend. It's good. And that next morning I came to, and I would have sworn to you that a hamster had slept in my mouth. My tongue had grown hair. We used to call it Angora teeth and chinchilla tongue. But I had never been that thirsty, and I leaned over a bathtub and I drank 3 or 4 gallons of water, and I headed downstairs, and my stomach turned into a lava lamp, and we were at this Hispanic girl's house, and her mother had made huevos rancheros. So I puked again, and then I got on a bus to go sing for Jesus. And this is where my drinking career begins. And I was both of those things, and I loved both of those things. And early in my drinking, there was a real tug-of-war about that, because I loved how it felt to sing in the choir with the Jesus Freaks. But I loved how it felt to be sneaking off to the parking lot to see those guys who had some beer in the back of their car. You know, I loved that feeling too. But here's how I made my decision. See, about Tuesday, all the kumbaya started wearing off, and my twitch started coming back. And I'm wandering around that high school, living from the outside in. And that's not working real well for me, because if you tell me I'm wonderful, I'm wonderful. If you tell me I'm terrible, I'm terrible. And heaven help us if I hear both, because I'm running around in circles trying to fix it. But alcohol is so powerful in my world, I don't even have to drink it to feel the effects. All I've got to do is plan my next drink, and I get a sense of ease and comfort. And so I drank. I drank through high school, and I graduated, and I went towards college. Obviously, that was... I've seen my transcripts. I used to say I went to college, but that's an exaggeration. You know, and the rest of my drunkalog is, these are the methods we tried. And I'm just going to tell you some of the methods we tried. Men were a method I tried. Man, did I try. Woo. I got an inventory that will say, I tried some men. My first night of legal drinking, I went to this bar with my friend Slaps. And we drove through the beer barn backwards, because I don't like to ask questions. And we bought beer so that we could get drunk so we could go drinking. You may be an alcoholic if you have to drink in order to prepare to go drinking. And so we have to drink in the car so we can walk in the bar. And we go to the bar, and that night I met the ideal man until I re-met Big Daddy. And oh, he was beautiful. I saw him from across the bar. He had long hair and a long beard, and he didn't like shoes. He was a freshman too, but he was 28. And his friends called him humongous, which I found fascinating. I still do not know why. That night we got drunk and fell into weird, you know, and there were a couple of things that made humongous the ideal man, because drunk or sober, men tend to wander off on me. And what I learned was that humongous had no job and no car. Now, for some women, that might go on the con list, but for me, I have discovered that if you date a man with no job and no car, when you drop him off somewhere and you come back later, he's still there. Or he's really easy to track because he's on foot and looks a little bit like Sasquatch. And And so that first night of legal drinking, I did something I had never done that became a pattern for me. We put his bicycle in the back of my car, and we drove off to the commune, and the honeymoon was on. I recognize that this is Alcoholics Anonymous, so I will talk very little about my drug use. However, I'm going to talk about his. Humongous and his friends like to trip on acid, and I will say in their defense, those people are organized. Drunks get drunk, and then they go, we need a plan. And we got no equipment to make one with. These guys plan on the front end. And I was really impressed because they would hire a band to build a bonfire and synchronize the sundial and whatever else it was they did. And I had some responsibilities at their parties. I was the chaperone for their acid trips. And I had two responsibilities. I had to make sure they didn't run into the fire or touch sharp things. I mean, I had the makings of an Al-Anon. I really did. If I could quit passing out, I could have definitely made it in there. And so they would go off and do what they did, and I would sit by the fire, and I got to drink the way I like to drink. Now, I didn't know this until I came to Alcoholics Anonymous and began talking to somebody about the first step, because I got to be sober to get honest about my drinking. But I didn't even understand why I ran around with these guys. Today, I can tell you that they were not the kind of guys who were going to say, Jennifer, we're concerned about your drinking. They are off naked in a field playing tambourines. They are not counting how many beers I'm slamming. And so I loved it. I mean, the relationship was on. I had a great time with the hippies. Although Humongous was a little lacking in focus, so I liked having a boyfriend, so I got 5 or 6 more. And it's only happened once in my life, but I get to talk about it a lot. And just because this is AA and I'm supposed to be honest, some of these men may not have ever thought of me as their girlfriend. But in my mind, we were all committed. I have noticed that alcoholic women seem to have a different standard for a relation, and Al-Anonics are even better. I've had many long-term relationships, drunk and sober, with men who do not know we're together. I've found that helps with the longevity of things. So I started seeing other guys, and they were different shapes, different sizes, different nationalities. We are the world. I mean, I'm an equal opportunity kind of gal. I didn't have any clothes. I had costumes, and I was having fun. And I drank. And it's one of the magical properties of alcohol is I can dress up and become whoever I think you want me to be. And I had fun. Only gradually things got worse. The university was discouraged by my lack of progress in higher education. So they invited me to pursue other things. The boyfriends were discouraged by my lack of focus, and they invited me to pursue other things, which hurt my feelings. I mean, I distinctly remember an evening when I walked into the bar with one guy I was seeing and another guy I was seeing was there, and I've read some Harlequin romances. I know how this is supposed to go down. They're supposed to fight for my honor. And here's what really happens. One guy walks up to another guy and he goes, "You can have her." And the other dude goes, No, seriously, I'm pretty sure you had her first. And I wish it had ended there, but it didn't. They went on and on. They sat down together, compared some notes, played rock, paper, scissors to see who was going to take me home. I was furious. And isn't that just alcoholism? That I walk in there with no regards to anybody else, and I twist this around where I'm the victim and they have humiliated me. And I walked around with that day after day, just feeding that lie I told myself. And I discovered that town, I had to get out of there. I mean, it was just a bad place. They didn't understand me there. I mean, and I was ready to take on the world. I had, 9 hours of college credit under my belt. I was ready to go. Clept out of 6 of them. But so I made my big geographic. This is another method I tried, geographic. I put all my stuff in a truck, and I moved one zip code away. I am not brave. You can put a thumbtack on my mother's house and go 30 minutes in any direction, and that's as far as I've gone. Because she ain't driving to California to bail me out. So I drove over a bridge and a lake, and it's a whole new world, and I started over there. I hadn't even unpacked a box. I'm going to start a new life, and many women know if you're going to start a new life, you got to get new hair. This is a principle I still practice, and so I got to get me some new hair for my new life in my new town. And I'm driving down Main Street, and I look over, and there's a life-size horse, and that's where I drew my inspiration. I decided in this town I will be Patsy Cline, and I whip into the first hairdresser shop that I find, and I sit down in the chair. I immediately, this is classic, immediately start talking like Reba McEntire. I'm like, tweezle me up some cowgirl hair. And this was the 80s, and everybody was perming. Guys were perming, girls were perming, dogs were perming, everybody got a perm. And so this lady starts perming my hair. She gets 3 rods in there, and she goes, "You party, don't you?" Now, I had been running around with the hippies, and I knew that I had an aura, and I was pretty impressed that she had picked up on that right away. I did not know that beer came out your pores. So she offered me a cold beer, and we got drunk and did my hair. And this is going to turn out exactly as bad as you think. By the time she takes the perm rods out, I have a shrubbery sitting on top of my head. I look like Link from the Mod Squad, and that's when she grabbed the scissors, and we were pretty toasted at that point. And what I wound up with was an asymmetric haircut. I had long hair on one side and short hair on the other. And she twirled me around in that chair, and I'm looking in the mirror, and there's 3 heads, and they're all mine, and they've all got bad hair. And if I am lying, I'm dying. I remember this verbatim. She's standing there bobbing and weaving, and she goes, "Nobody in town has this haircut." And I'm looking in that mirror thinking, nobody in town wants this haircut. And then she said the magic word. She said, "You know, go honky-tonkin'?" And I said, "Absolutely." Now, at this point in my life, I've never honked, nor have I tonked. But I know that this involves cocktails, so sign me up. And I went down to the place with the orange horse. I bought myself some hot pink ropers and a belt buckle the size of my head. She screwed up some more hair. And we reconvened, and we went off to the Moonlighter in Lake Dallas, Texas. It was a swank little establishment. Rock parking lot, dually trucks, guns in the gun rack. This was not Billy Bob's. And I walked in, and every head turned. And y'all are a lot quicker than I am, because it took me almost 10 full years of sobriety to realize my lopsided hair could have had something to do with that. God is so gentle. Because I was completely unaware of that until I was prepared to handle it. But every head in the Moonlighter turned, and I was popular there. I was like the hillbilly homecoming queen. Because those men were old. They were 40, 50, 60, 80, whatever. And I loved the Moonlighter because at any given time there were no more than 3 women in there, and one of the women's name was Meemaw, you know? And I'm not really swimming in self-esteem. I need to know that I can walk out with the gold, the silver, or the bronze. And let me assure you that the bronze at the Moonlighter does not come with stock parts, okay? You could come to in the morning and find some teeth on the nightstand, or a limb laying up against the wall. It was a dark day when they stopped putting names on the back of belts. That was so handy. And God, I can just hear my mother going, "No, Jennifer, don't tell it." Remember, I was going to be a minister. So anyway, I'm glad this stuff is funny now. I'm glad that I'm free. I really am. But and this is just how I'm living. And by day, I'm a hungover preschool teacher. Miss Jennifer is detoxing in the daycare every day, which I do not recommend. There's a career choice with a hangover. We're gonna need to paste today. Man. Those kids, bless her, Miss Jennifer is a little shaky. And every day, as a matter of fact, while I was working at that daycare, somebody offered me a magical substance that I had said no to a million times. I really had. I'd said no because Nancy told me to. And I just said no to drugs right up until I didn't. And I was at a Halloween party with my Insta friend, the hairdresser, and she offered me some stuff on the counter in the bathroom, and I just said no. And she said the magic word. She said, "It'll make you last as long as the party." Oh. Well, get out my way. And I went on the most effective diet. And it made me a really quick preschool teacher. I dropped a lot of weight real fast and started talking to the curtains from time to time. I did not know that was my eyes dilating. I literally thought the curtains and the carpet were talking to me. I can't understand you. And one of the reasons that I do not identify myself as an alcoholic and anything is I'm an alcoholic and an alcoholic. I used other things in an effort to control and enjoy the consequences of my drinking. But let me assure you that on the day when a DEA agent came to my house because of a misunderstanding, I really was. I was completely ignorant of what was going on. I knew this guy had a lot of stuff, but I never put together that he was a flight attendant, and maybe he wasn't just a flight attendant. But anyway, they showed up, and let me just assure you that in 24 hours, clean, bing, did not need a sponsor, did not need a 12-step program. They showed up, said, "Miss, you really need to stop doing what you're doing," and I said, "Done." And I did. But gradually things got worse because I'm an alcoholic. And I kept right on drinking. I started collecting DWIs. It's a hobby of mine, DUIs, for those of you who don't speak Texan. And I got my first one, and I figured that's what happens to all party girls. And it's like Girl Scouts. You just get your patches. You wake up with the teeth on the bedstand. That's a patch. And you get a DWI. That's a patch. And I went to this attorney, and in his garage, that's where he worked. And we started talking about what had happened, and he said, when they pull you over again, here's what I want you to do. And I'm thinking, I've already got one. You don't need two patches for the same thing. And less than 6 months later, I'm assuming the position, and not in the good way, and I know that I don't just have an attorney, I've got a psychic, because he had predicted this was going to happen again. And the state of Texas gets really annoyed when you get arrested for something you haven't even been convicted of yet. And plus, those Mothers Against Drunk Driving had just really gotten busy. And I discovered there was a problem. I mean, I started thinking about this, and seriously. And the term is driving while intoxicated. Clearly, they put the most important word first. I discover I've got a driving problem. And so I moved next door to my bar of choice. Problem solved. Gradually, things got worse. I got me a home bar. I mean, surely, these are the methods we tried. Surely a home bar will work. And for the rest of my drinking, I drank every single day at that bar, weekends and holidays included. And I developed what my friend Blind Joe calls Skid Row of the soul. There were men and no men, jobs and no jobs, utilities and no utilities. When I drink, I get drunk. That's my primary purpose. And I didn't lose some of the things that other people lost because I forgot to get it. I pick up that first drink and I get busy with what I got to do. And if we want to dance and if we want to meet and if we want to date, we can do all of that after I get drunk. But first I got to get drunk. And I turned my will and my life over to the care of anybody who would have it. And I'm an alcoholic woman. Things began to happen to me. When I was drunk, that you have to be sober to get out of, and I wasn't sober. And I gave away, compromised, or allowed somebody to take something that was never theirs, and it put some dirty that soap doesn't wash off. If I was a heavy drinker or a non-alcoholic, these situations and circumstances that began to occur would be a sufficient reason for me to stop or moderate. But one of the ways that I know for sure that I'm a real alcoholic is that I couldn't stop or moderate because of these. These were a good reason to keep right on going. You see, the book says, one of the very first words I ever looked up was oblivion. It says we drink for oblivion, to seek oblivion. And when I looked up that word, what it said was to seek to forget or to be forgotten. And that's why I was drinking, to forget or to be forgotten. And gradually things got worse. I started recognizing there was a problem, and I started looking around at the way that other people drank. And here's another method I tried, and then I promise I'm going to get sober. I've made that promise before. I noticed that there were some women in the bar, in my home bar, and they didn't get in the same kind of trouble. They were school teachers, and they liked to party, but they didn't drink like me, and I decided that was part of my problem. I was always drinking with the guys, and it never led to happy things, and so I decided I needed to drink with the girls, and we would have girls' night, and girls' night would be awesome, and I would go out with the girls, and some of my bad ideas might not occur because they would intervene. And so I called the girls and I said, I really want to do girls' night. And they said, great, we'll go out on Friday night and we'll do girls' night. Now, I thought girls' night meant we would just go to the bar and get drunk with girls, but that's not it. Apparently, there's getting ready involved in girls' night. I did not know this. And so there's all these phone calls and hot rollers and all this stuff that we have to do. And I thought we'd just go to my home bar. But no, for girls' night, we have to go to a different bar. And so we got to get all these 4 girls in the same car ready. And that takes forever. And we got to stop for condoms and gum and pantyhose. And I mean, I'm starting to detox here. And then we got to drive to the bar, and I'm about to bite the head off a live bat because it's about 8 o'clock, and I haven't had a cocktail yet. And I head up to the bar, and they go, oh, no, we sit at a table. And I'm like, are you flipping kidding me? So we got to sit at the table, and the cocktail waitress, who has no focus whatsoever, she's in no hurry to scurry over to a table full of chicks. And when she finally gets there, here's what the girls do. I don't know, what do you want to have? I don't know, I was kind of thinking, because apparently there are different drinks for different occasions, and like mood drinks, and And this was back in the day when every frozen drink was handcrafted. And they all order frozen drinks. And I need a triple shot of beer with a water back. That's my first drink. And we gotta wait while they're cutting flipping fruit. And they finally get the drinks out, and I just get my warm-up beer down, and one of the girls gets that look. You know, that smells bad, something, well, there's not really much going on here. And I'm like, no. And they have this little girl committee meeting, and they decide we gotta go somewhere else. So I grab one of the Slurpee drinks, slam it down, my skull cracks, and we get in the car, and we drive. And we repeat the routine because apparently the decision on the drink does not carry to the next, but I don't know, what are you thinking? And at that place, the band doesn't sound good, and we gotta drive, and then we go to the next bar, and Leslie's ex-boyfriend is here, so we gotta drive, and I'm like, leave me here, just leave me here. And they would say, Jennifer, we're in Fort Worth. I do not care, I will walk home, but you don't drink right. If I drank like you, I wouldn't drink much either. Because what I know is if you will sit still, something will be happening, the band will sound good, and Leslie's ex-boyfriend will not matter. And gradually things got worse. I was engaged 7 times and never married, not a closer. And the last time I had a dress and a cake and everything ready, and he was in the Navy. Well, he went into the Navy to get away from me. I mean, let's be honest. Because I'm the kind of gal, if I can't have you, I'm going to make sure nobody else wants you. And and we got engaged, shipped ashore, and he kept getting thrown in the brig. I don't know, maybe a little alcoholism, I don't know. Ding, 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 ding. And our wedding just kept getting postponed, and I didn't know it was due to alcoholism, but now it makes perfect sense. And that's when the bottom fell out of my boat. And I began to drink, and with a vengeance. And I moved home, and I brought alcoholism to my mom and dad. Kept drinking in the other town, lived with my parents, and I got my third DWI, driving back home one night. And that night I had my moment of clarity. I had it in a jail cell. I always recommend that. It cost about the same as treatment, and there's less to unlearn. That's kind of a joke. And nah, it's just whenever you're ready, you're ready. And I sat in a jail cell, and I had a moment of clarity. And I told the truth that night. When they asked me how much I had to drink, I said, whatever, $67 worth. I told them how much the tab was. I didn't know how many drinks that was, but I knew how much I just paid. And I told the truth, and I sat in that jail cell, and I began to realize that I belonged there. Every other time I'd gone to jail, I had thought, what's a nice girl like me doing in a place like this? And that night I realized that I belonged in that cage. Because for me to feel halfway okay, for me to have the hope that I'm going to feel halfway okay, I have to put a substance in my body that makes me a danger to myself and others. And I can't swear to you, me, God, anybody else that I won't do it again. I don't even bother to swear that anymore because I'd been trying. And I couldn't make it 24 hours without a drink. And I knew I belonged there for your safety and for mine. And I began to think about the meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous I had visited. I did not join your crappy club because you were so adamant about this not drinking thing. I mean, you laughed at things that were not funny, and you shared things you should keep to yourself. And then there was that annoying hi, Bill thing that I really... But I began to think about meetings sitting in a jail cell, and it didn't seem that bad. As a matter of fact, I made a commitment to me and God and me, and that I was going to AA as soon as I got out, and then they let me out. And whoops, I started thinking again. And what I started thinking was I knew a guy with 8 DWIs, and he was drinking at my home bar. Here's a man with a real answer. And I went to go talk to Jimmy, my legal advisor, at my home bar. And I sat down. They put my drinks on the bar, and I said, no, can't have that. In a little trouble. Got to talk to Jimmy, legal advisor. Sit down with Jimmy, and we began to talk, and 2 significant things happened that night. The first was that I told Jimmy about the trouble I was in. I had met with my lawyer. They told me I was going to spend a year in jail. I am not good at jail. I'm not an overachiever. There are girls with mustaches in there. My weapon of choice is projectile weeping, and I am not made of tough by any stretch of the imagination. And so I'm talking to Jimmy about how to get out of this, and what Jimmy says to me is, I could afford to be the kind of drunk I am. You can't afford to be the kind of drunk you are. And I know he was talking about money. Today I know he was talking about money. But that's not what I thought about. I thought about what I pay to drink. And alcoholics pay a whole lot more than money and time to drink. And as a matter of fact, all night long I thought about what Jimmy said. The other thing that happened was, at some point in the night there was a drink in front of me. And I drank it. As a matter of fact, I had been drinking. I had had more than one drink before I realized I had picked up a drink. And I was terrified. Because I knew how much trouble I was in. I knew I couldn't drink that night, and I had already drank before I realized that I had made a decision to drink. And I was terrified. And that's when I began to drive around an AA group. Anybody else orbit the group? From sun up to sundown, I drove around a little greenhouse in Plano. Just around and around. I knew your meeting schedule because I followed the cups. You know, I knew when the people with the styrofoam cups went in and out. because I just drove around and around, and I would sit in nearby parking lots, and I would wait for you to show up like the Jehovah's Witnesses. And I would lock myself in my parents' bathroom when I got home because I couldn't walk all the way in, and I would practice saying, "My name is Jennifer and I'm an alcoholic." Oh my God, no. And on December 4th of 1992, I walked into a late meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I sat down, and the Plano group at that time was the quintessential AA group. It's the place where furniture goes to die. When Grandma says that couch has to go, it goes to the Plano group. And the walls are brown, and they've got they got this artwork that's just there to baffle the newcomers. There's a picture of the 3 frogs, and I mean, everybody with more than 10 years got to grab a newcomer and drag you over to the frog picture. Which one of those frogs has made a decision? Don't tell me now. Tell me after the meeting, man. And I would sit in that meeting and I would stare at those frogs. And there was this one fat frog, and one of his eyes was closed a little bit more than the other eye, and I thought, that's the frog, that's the one. I sat down, and I sat in the back of the room. It was a long, skinny room, and just like my favorite bars, it had an exit this way and an exit that way, easy escape. And I sat right by the back door, and they invited me to come sit up with everybody else. And that's what's been happening to me. That's what happened to me in Alcoholics Anonymous. They invited me to be a part of the circle, and that's significant. I sat down in a rocking chair. It had wagon trains on it because that's from the era in which this furniture was built. It was velveteen. It was a beauty, and it was made out of 2x4s, and the handles had these divots in it where newcomers sat and rocked, and that became my chair. And I sat in that meeting, and I listened to people share. I was 10 days without a drink. I did not have a solution. I was thinking about dying more than I was living, and I sat in that meeting, and I listened to people share. I'd bought a big book at half-price books because I wasn't really willing to invest $5. Because I've joined Weight Watchers many times. Not a lifetime member yet, okay? And so I wasn't really feeling that great about AA. You know, I had the same attitude. I kind of figured it probably wouldn't work, but it probably wouldn't hurt me. And so I bought the big book, and I read it before I went to the meeting because I didn't want to sound dumb. And I sat in that meeting, and I listened, and I didn't understand a flippin' word that most of the people in that meeting were saying until one of my greatest teachers in Alcoholics Anonymous began to share, and his name was Gene. And Gene was not a member of the Mensa. As a matter of fact, he had a ZZ Top beard that came down to his belly button and a fishing cap. Gene was not a member of the Mensa. But what Gene knew how to do was to talk to a newcomer so that we could understand. And Gene said one of the most profound things I'd ever heard. He said, "I didn't know I was an alcoholic. Hell, I just thought I was thirsty." And I am bawling uncontrollably, and I'm thinking, me too, Gene. Me too. And he said, "But here's my problem. The more I drank, the thirstier I got." The more I drank, the thirstier I got. And that starts with the first drink. Shazam! I am sitting in that chair, and it all makes sense. Gene says one thing, and it all makes sense. You see, I had my home bar, and it was right across from this factory, and there were 3 shifts of guys who came through, which is very handy for a gal like me. And there are guys who come to bars with watches. I am baffled. I'm not wearing a watch now. But they come into the bar with the watch, and they do what the watch says. They'll have 1 drink, maybe 2, 3 on their birthday, and they'll look at the watch, and they'll go, "Oh, look at the time. Mama's got dinner waiting on me." And I would say, "We've got pretzels here. Why would you do that?" Some other mook would have 1 drink, maybe 2. He'd look at his watch. "Oh, look at the time. The game's about to start." And that's when I'd turn into the flight attendant. "We have TVs here, here, and here." Why would you do that? But that was my home bar. I drank there every day, and my question changed from "why would you do that" to "how do you do that?" Because I wasn't gonna stay there every night. And then I just did. And Gene explained why. The more I drank, the thirstier I got, and it starts with the first drink. And I was qualified for Alcoholics Anonymous right then and right there. I knew I belonged. I didn't know if I could stay, but I knew I belonged. And then they asked me if I'd like to share. And everybody in that meeting, I listened. You know, we read the book as newcomers, some of us do. But we don't understand it, and so we get our information from meetings. And there was a lot of andas in that meeting, so I thought you had to be an anda. And they asked me if I'd like to share, and I said sure, which was a terrible mistake because I hadn't shut up since. And except 1 month when my sponsor told me I'd like to listen. But I said, my name is Jennifer, and I'm an alcoholic, and I'm a thief, a whore, and a liar. I didn't know that once you said alcoholic, you had the rest of it covered. I wanted to be very specific so that you knew what you were getting. And that might have been a very dangerous thing for me to say. However, I need you to know what I looked like when I came into Alcoholics Anonymous. I looked like Pat from Saturday Night Live. They didn't know what it was. I had short hair, a bald cap, I had some sweats that had become my uniform, and I wore boy shoes. They did not know what it was. And honestly, I thought I was a lesbian that didn't like women. So we were all a little confused. And I talked to him about, about how I'd been living and how I'd been dying one day at a time. And I told him the thing that I was most ashamed of was that I knew I would never get or stay sober by myself. And those tacky people smiled and nodded. I thought they should at least weep with me. And they smiled and nodded. And what I know that now that I didn't know then was you can fool the fans, but you can't fool the players. And that night I was a player in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I didn't even know it because I was fresh out of Bright Ideas. And I just wanted you to let me stay. And they gave me the hugs, and they gave me the newcomer's packet, and I used to say, and then they asked me to go to Denny's. I do not believe that's what happened. I believe what happened was they told me to go to Denny's. Because I went to Denny's. And I was one day into Alcoholics Anonymous, they must have told me to go to Denny's. Because we're real busy. Newcomers don't have a thing to do, we're real busy, because we don't know what you're going to do to us, And so I went to Denny's, and I can remember thinking on the drive over there that that's where you fill out the paperwork. And that's where I went so that I could fill out the paperwork to join Alcoholics Anonymous. And I went to that Denny's, and I learned some things about Alcoholics Anonymous. The book of Alcoholics Anonymous began to open up to me, and I hadn't really understood it yet. But what happened was we are people who normally would not mix, but there exists among us a fellowship and a friendliness that is indescribably wonderful, and I began to see that in that Denny's. I also learned that I don't know why they call it anonymous, because you're not. You're at Denny's going, isn't that just like an alcoholic? And I am underneath the menu singing Kumbaya, thinking I was the almost homecoming queen in this town in 1985. Yeah, because the ego comes back quick. And I didn't know that if you're at Denny's at 3 in the morning, you're either a member of AA or a future member of AA. And I found that you laugh at things that aren't funny, and I found that you tell things that you shouldn't share, and I found that you were just absolutely okay in your own skin with these people, and you didn't take a drink. And I did what these crazy people told me to do, and I prayed even though I didn't believe it would work. And I didn't drink, and I went to the next meeting, and I walked in the door, and a guy named Tennessee Danny walked up to me, and he said, "Hey, your name's Jennifer, right?" And I said, "Why? What have you heard?" And he said, "Nothing. Did you drink today?" And I said, "No." And he said, "Welcome to your second day of sobriety." And I was hooked. I was hooked. He was cute. But let me promise you that the big deal was not that he knew it was my second day of sobriety. The big deal was that he knew my name. He remembered my name. And I showed up. And I showed up, and I showed up. And before I had a God of my own understanding, I had you. And I had your stories. And I fell in love with you and your stories. And you spoon-fed me God, and I didn't know that was... And I did everything I did because I just wanted to stay with you. And I got a sponsor. Get a sponsor. Come to the women's meeting. Come to the women's meeting. All the women travel in packs and herds, little packs and herds of women. I don't like you one-on-one. What do I need with a pack or a herd? But I capitulated, and I went and I got a sponsor who hadn't even worked all the steps. I didn't know that. Didn't matter. I did what she told me to do. She made me drive around Janet from another planet. Woo! Janet was a special teacher in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I do not know to this day if she's an alcoholic. I know that she went to a lot of A&A meetings, and she had every right to be there. She said she had a desire to stop drinking. And I drove her to and from the meetings. I believe that she had electroshock therapy because she would ask the same question 92 times in 4 blocks. Jennifer, how old are you? I don't know, 26, Janet. And we'd drive about a half a block. Jennifer, how old are you? Still 26, Janet. And she'd changed my radio station, which made me twitch. And then, how old are you? I'm older now, Janet. And we'd go to the meeting, and Janet would be up and down, and my sponsor told me I had to sit in the chair and listen even when the weirdos shared, and it's a good thing because a couple of those weirdos kept me sober. They said exactly what I needed to hear. God speaks through squirrels, and I learned that in Alcoholics Anonymous. Well, I'm here, and but Janet was my special friend, and I hated her. I would cry after dropping her off because I knew my sponsor was not going to let me out of this. And my sponsor told me that I had this enormous ego, and I didn't want to embarrass her, but I knew she had me mixed up with the other girls she sponsored. I'm low self-esteem, not enormous ego. And I'm in this meeting, and Janet, I kid you not, she used to carry this giant purse that had everything. It was like Mary Poppins' bag. And she would pull out fruit cups and costumes and all kinds of crap out of this bag. And in one of the meetings, Janet shaved her legs, and I mean with shaving cream. And I'm like, hello, I'm looking at all the old timers because they're just going on with the meeting. And here is Janet with her leg up in the air, and I'm thinking, somebody has got to help this girl. And they are just going on about their business. I mean, I have seen full-on battles at this group over the size of the styrofoam coffee cups, but Janet is hanging from the ceiling fan and nobody's doing nothing. So I'm driving Janet home, and she's asking how old I am, and I'm thinking because she's my special friend, clearly God has tagged me. And I said, Janet, these meetings are really helping me, and it would really help me out a ton if you would sit down and maybe listen. And if you listened, maybe you could find somebody who could help you. And if you got a sponsor, maybe you could work the steps. And if you work the steps, maybe something would happen to you, Janet. Maybe and the weirdest thing happened is I looked into her eyes, and Janet was there. I mean, she was really there in that moment. And I got really excited because I knew she was going to ask me to sponsor her. And she said, Jennifer? And I said, yeah. And she said, how old are you? And that, too, is a pattern. I saw the light come on, and I kept right on talking until I snuffed it out completely. And I watched Janet walk into her home, and I knew she was going to get on the phone to call the group to have me come back and get her. And I'm sitting in front of her house. And I started laughing, and I started crying, and I started banging my head on the steering wheel. And I'm not just saying that to be facetious. I literally banged my head on the steering wheel, and about the 4th hit, it occurred to me that I have an enormous ego. Because I think that Janet needs to change so that I can be okay. And what the program of Alcoholics Anonymous and Al-Anon is about is that I get to change so that Janet can be whoever and whatever Janet is. And I get to live happy, joyous, and free. And it's not contingent on anything or anybody but the God of my own understanding. And I worked these steps like my life depended on it, and I continue to. What happened to me are the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. Worked over and over and over again. I've sponsored only crazy women. I don't know that they're another kind, but I get the whack jobs. And I have sponsored none of them long term. None. But I have stayed sober. I've gone through the doctor's opinion with over 3,000 women. And all I can know for sure is that I needed to read the doctor's opinion 3,000 times so that I have remained convinced that I am an alcoholic who wants to get sober and stay sober for the rest of my life, one day at a time. What happened to me are the meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous, the people of Alcoholics Anonymous, and the lessons of life. I came in a high-bottom drunk who still trusted her head, and it took me 14 years to get a God that loved me absolutely unconditionally because I knew better. But I kept suiting up and showing up and doing the deal until finally I was sitting in the backyard and God just beat the tar out of me with love. And I had a moment of clarity at 14 years of sobriety, and I realized that I was inexplicably and unconditionally loved. And the skies opened up, and I said, fine! Whatever! You can just love me. And my whole world got different. And the love I could never find, no matter how hard I looked for it, showed up 6 weeks after I stopped the cougar thing. And I'd met him when I was 17 years old. I was the president of Student Senate, and he was in the Student Senate. And I would chair the meetings, and he would sit at the desk, and his head would be cocked, and he would look at me. And he would call my name, and he'd say, Jennifer, Jennifer, Jennifer. And I would come over, and I'd say, yes, Steve. And he'd go, and he'd walk off. We went on 2 dates, and I knew I'd kill him, and so I ran away. And I ran into him a couple of times, and I ran away. And right before I turned 40 years old, I got an email on MySpace. And it was a picture of a guy holding a giant fish. And I thought, who is this? And I looked at the name, and I thought, oh, it's Steve. And I met this guy. He was living in Colorado. For several years, we had lived across the street from each other. I had walked every morning around the restaurant where he worked, and I didn't know it. So he moves to Colorado, and suddenly we connect. And we got to do things in a very different way. He came for a week, and we fell in love, and he took me on a date, like to a restaurant, with tablecloths and a chef that stopped by the table. It was like on TV. I'm used to, picking up a guy at his mom's house and going to the CC's, and I went out with this guy, and I fell in love with him, and we got engaged, and we stayed engaged for 13 months. I gave him time to run, and we got married, and it was like the cross between a carnival and a YPAW convention. I mean, we had a photo booth and candy and dancing, and it was just amazing. And this God that I thought wasn't paying attention, he gave a fat girl a chef. And some amazing things began to happen, and I learned more about God's love by getting to love him than I ever learned before. And the reason I knew he was the one is that I had spent all my life looking for a man who would take care of me. And one day he called me, and he had been washing his mother's hair because she was in the hospital, and he was washing his mom's hair. And instead of thinking, he'll take care of me, I thought, I've got to take care of him so that he can do the things that he needs to do because he's a good man. And I want to help him do what he has to do. And I knew it was different because it wasn't about me. It was about being a part of what he was doing and being of service to him and being in love with him. And we had decided that we were going to let God decide if we were going to have babies because I'm a little late in this game. And we got pregnant. And we were so excited, and I was so scared. And then 7 weeks later, I miscarried. And that sounds like a terribly sad thing, but let me just tell you that for 3 days, I was as sad as I have ever been. And then I woke up one day, and I was okay. And I knew I was going to be okay. And I knew there was no deep lesson in it. And I knew it wasn't a punishment. And I knew it wasn't about the life I'd lived before or the life I lived in here. I knew it wasn't about him or me. I knew it was just about biology, strong cells and weak cells. And it was weak cells, and that's okay. And I moved on. And I thought there was something terribly wrong with me. That I was just okay. Because I've had breakups that screwed me up for 7 years. I mean, really. I am not that well adjusted. And I was just okay, but I didn't tell everybody that I was just okay because I thought there was something terribly wrong with me. That I could let that baby go and be all right. And I went to this dumb women's thing because I never go to women's things. It's just entirely too much estrogen in one place. And they play games. And I got tricked into this women's thing because they were playing this game. I accidentally went to this workshop I didn't want to go to, and you had to stand in a circle and close your eyes, and people were going to whisper messages from God into your ear, and I did not want to do that. I wanted to run, but I had this big tag that said speaker on it, and I didn't want them to know I was a chicken, and so I stood in this circle and I closed my eyes, and luckily the first lady to whisper my message from God was scarier than I was, and so she's saying this stuff in my ear, and I want out of there so bad. And right before they dinged the bell so that she could stop talking and I could come out of my skin, the very last thing that she said was, "And you're an amazing mother." And they rang the bell, and all this stuff that I hadn't thought about and I hadn't felt and I'd been trying to kind of push away because I had been okay, came up, and I was just mad. I was just mad because I'm not a mother. And just as I thought that, this wave of okay came. And this thought came. Says who? You did what I told you to do. I gave you a baby, and you gave that baby back to me. And I'm taking care of it. And I found out I'm a good mother. I did exactly what God needed me to do. And we got to move on and do other things. And because of you, because of Alcoholics Anonymous, because of a few lessons I learned very slowly, because of 12 steps that I work over and over and over again, and a message that I carry that a lot of people don't want to hear and aren't quite ready to do, I get to live an amazing life. I know who I am, I know what I am, and most importantly, I know whose I am. And I have a message to carry. Alcoholics Anonymous is very simple. It's monkey see, monkey do. The hardest part is discovering and remembering that you're a monkey. And I'm so grateful that my tail gets to sit with yours. I'm glad to be here. It's a good day to be sober.
Sorry to interrupt your viewing. Taper Dave here. Just wanted to take a second to ask you to like and subscribe to my channel. Let me know if you like what you're listening. I've got some very good talks here, and this one's a great one. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Tell me what you think. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right, but I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.